Hello, everyone. Say anything to anybody?
Hello.
For people that don't know me too, my name's Greg. I'm with Silver Liberties.
Exactly.
I've been trading derivatives for the better part of 20 years, about 16, 17 years or so.
Your name is not Greg.
What's that?
Your name is not Greg. On this channel, it's Nostradamus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let him go. He's only got 19 minutes. Let him go.
Yeah.
Let him go. So, Greg, Dave and I, we've come to the conclusion that by looking at the S&P 500, for example, the Russell, the Dow, etc. I think particularly with the NASDAQ and the S&P, that it's really, again, at a pivotal point where it could bust to the upside or it could definitely go to trend and collapse and fall to like 3,200 or something like that. And so it seems to be teetering, you know what I mean? And we've got a big interest payment tomorrow, from what I understand.
It's like
those are only going to keep getting bigger.
Yeah, spot on. We got a government interest payment due tomorrow. On June 1st, we've got the debt ceiling thing coming. And then later in June, there's the quarterly corporate tax payments. And then, of course...
You mean the sitcom that they call the debt ceiling?
Right on, bro. And then fourthly, check this out. I keep reminding myself and Dave, my understanding is, and I want to bounce this off you, the Fed is rolling out the CBDCs, are they not, in July?
Yeah, it's already in the works.
Yeah, it's going to be here in July.
Yeah, right? Let me take your first question there. So I'm actually, when we're done with this, I'm going to put together a video for my $20 tier on Patreon. And those are those. So Dave, you'll see that probably later today or early tomorrow morning. And to Dan's point, I'm a cycle trader and I'm a swing trader. So what I do is I literally go back hundreds of years into our fiscal past and I look for similarity. So Dave already knows this, but I believe we're trading on either the 50-year or the 100-year cycle. Now, personally, I believe it's on the 50-year cycle. And it's been highly accurate. Last year, I mean, Dave can attest to this. I do a forecast every year, highly, highly accurate, and I put it together the year in advance. I have a massive, massive cycle starting tomorrow, specifically on the QQQs, and it is bearish. And that's all I want to go into. I kind of leave that for my higher end.
Thank God I'm short.
What's that?
Thank God I'm short then.
And Dan too. So I shorted housing, specifically BLDR on Friday, and I had a max move on it at $120. And if you go look at the chart of that, it's straight up. It doesn't really make any sense. The company's bought back something like $630 million worth of its shares. And I'm in the camp that you are. I think we're sitting on a knife's edge. And ultimately, my bet back in 2006, when I kind of started all this stuff up, and the name of the little business is Silver Liberties, I got heavily into precious metals. And I believed around the year 2018, we would effectively hyperinflate or have massive stagflation. And that's essentially exactly what we got. And I don't think it's going to change. I think the Fed knows what's coming. We had Biden, late last year, change the definition of recession. And then we have banks failing while Jamie Dimon, head of JP Morgan, comes out and says that the banks are strong. And the Federal Reserve has been historically, or at the quickest pace in history, raising interest rates. I think they know what's going on because they are going to have to pivot. And I believe, and David knows this, I've been talking about massive, massive turmoil sometime in May, possibly into June, that will last for the next 20 years. And I think we are, to your point, Dan, on the nice edge. I just think it's going to go down.
And Jamie was just in China.
What was he doing in China?
He was making a deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. He was making a deal. According to Vince, I forget his name, he's very good. He believes that Jamie is trying to become the conduit to move the metals from the west to the east.
Very possible.
Because they own so much silver. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's going on globally, central banks, and a lot of the smaller central banks, are setting records buying gold. And why are they doing that? I think we cut Russia out of SWIFT. Second that happened, the globe started to move away from the dollar. We pulled ourselves out of the Middle East, Afghanistan very quickly. The Saudis responded by going, you know what? We might sell our oil outside of dollars, right? And we've watched the globe move away from dollars. And Dan, I don't think I finished with your questions too. The fact that CBDCs are rolling out as all of this is happening, I've been doing this almost 20 years. I don't believe that's a coincidence. Is it possible? Sure. I highly doubt it.
I agree.
As when you dig deeper too into the banks that are failing, one of the overlapping similarities between the banks that have failed is they're all heavily into crypto. So then you got to ask the question: are they allowing these few banks that are kind of friendly to the crypto space? Are they allowing those to collapse on purpose? We watched FTX collapse. My brother just did a video. Was it Bittrex? I think. I apologize. Was it Bittrex? Yeah, Dave's nodding his head. Also just went down. They're removing the on-ramps for the average person to get into non-CBDC cryptos, potentially, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it is. It's amazing to watch it. Yeah. But I'm still a huge metals bull. Silver got whacked this past week. But again, too, I just put out a market update video. From a technical standpoint, it didn't do any real damage to it. I think all they're doing is, I think news is very, very close to dropping. I think we're going to get something this week. Max, no longer than June. And I think they smashed silver this week just so that it doesn't explode higher. It allows it to kind of, they pull it down a little bit. They'll release some news. Silver will probably go up $3-4. And they'll probably try to cap it at 30. I think once silver gets past 30, it's game on to 50 and then all-time new highs. And gold still is hovering near all-time new highs. Something's going on behind the curtain, I believe.
Yeah, and oil's getting whacked as well. Yeah. It was Binance. Your brother put up something. Binance leaves Ontario.
Oh, it's Binance. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on in the crypto space too.
That's amazing.
Well, we're definitely. I mean, you can definitely feel this building into like a crescendo where the energy is building, where it's like a heavyweight fight where there's a hook, a left. They're trading punches, and sooner or later, we're going to get an outcome here. Sooner or later, there's right now. There are a lot of people, including the guy in the upper right corner there, Danimal, who is still very bullish on things like NVIDIA and Apple and things. And I'm telling him, I think it's like when you got to vomit, you just want to get it over with. And,
Dave, I think it's interesting you're talking about energy because I'm definitely feeling it. I've been in a weird kind of headspace of late where really, I started this stuff up on YouTube for two reasons. Was one, it's a bit of, it's almost like journaling for me. It's a little cathartic to talk about this stuff and not just keep it in my own head. But then also I study this stuff because I enjoy it. I enjoy trying to figure out complex data and disseminating it in a simple format to people. And I just kind of wanted to wake people up. I'm worried about friends and family, being only in stocks and maybe housing. And throughout human history, when countries do what the United States is doing now, their currency has a 100% fail rate. The only thing we don't know is the timeline on it. But why, again, are they releasing CBDCs? Why is gold at all-time new highs? Why are they telling us that the banking system is strong? Why are they changing the definition of recession? Why are central banks globally setting records buying gold? Something is coming. And I'm now at the point, I think, where it's so obvious to me that the things that they're doing and saying are to keep the illusion alive that things are fine. And I think it's already broken. I think it's already snapped.
Oh, 100%.
My only thing with the knife's edge, to Dan's point, is if they revert back to doing QE, which I think they will do, and history says that they will, you could see the likes of Apple and Nvidia double, triple, go up hundreds, of, could go up 1,000% because the dollar will have no value.
Well, me and Dan just had a chat yesterday, and I told him I think we're going to have another deflationary event like March 2020. That's what it feels like to me, Greg. It feels like that same vibe. Like at the end of 2019, I don't know if you remember me. When me and Dan were just starting to trade, we were a bunch of dummies, and we know a little bit more now. But back then, we were accumulating like TVIX and UVXY because we're like volatility, baby, volatility, and we didn't even understand contango back then. But long story short, we knew we were novices and we knew something was wrong. And what we didn't have back then is we didn't have the patience to wait. And that's what you have now is you say, you see it and you just know you got to wait. You can't time yourself out. You can't say, well, I guess I was wrong. You just got to be patient.
Yeah. I mean, that's where, when I first started trading, because I think one of the things I do well, and it's a double-edged sword, is I see things before most people, I think. But because I see it, I go, well, if I see it, everyone sees it. So it's going to happen really quickly. But I'm noticing I'm usually like 2 to 5 years ahead. So when I see something, I got to go, all right, pump the brakes because I got to wait for everyone else to catch up. So I've lost money in the past doing exactly what you just said. That's how I found technicals. And a good example is probably Builder right now, right? Like watching a home builder basically go up in this environment where the sales in general and housing's down like 60, 70, 80%, makes no sense. But I sat there and I have max moves and I have ways of trying to figure certain stuff out. It keeps my emotions in check. And I think it was Friday, it got to 19.14 before it decided to reverse and drop $3 or $4, right? As again, I have cycles coming up. So that trade there wasn't just willy-nilly. I have a major bearish cycle starting tomorrow. So that was timed on purpose. So I looked for price and timing, and it's very difficult to do that, but I've spent the better part of 20 years studying cycles.
You're right on. I mean, you're one of the best I've listened to as far as your ability to process the cycles and your ability to think outside the box. Like you said, the billionaires use the type of stuff that you use to analyze this stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Dave, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. I don't think I'm the best personally, but
no, I said one of the best.
One of the best, yeah. But the quote that you're referencing there is from JP Morgan, and I use a bit. This might turn people off because they'll just see a little part of it. But I do use a little bit of astrology to get these dates for my cycle stuff, and I got that from JP Morgan, the original JP Morgan, who said millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And David, I mean, watching me do this for, I don't know how long you've been following, for years. Isn't it really? And the thing though, is it still shocks me when I do this stuff, right? Because I'll put my forecast together in December and, I don't know if anything's going to happen this week, but May 16th is a major cycle for me using astrology. And if something happens this week, and Dave, you've seen this a bunch of times in the past, I'll put out a cycle. My last cycle was right when the banks started to crack and fail. Right? April. They happened in the week during my cycle. We had 3 banks fail in my cycle. Now, the market didn't go down because they printed money basically and saved it. They handed out some loans to banks, not fixing any of the problems whatsoever, but it happened perfectly during my cycle.
Yeah, and that's huge because there were jokers 2 months before telling everybody to go into banks because with the way the Fed's acting, it's the safest place to be because the banks are going to make a killing. Wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you can't watch like CNBC. So their job is to report what they think is happening. But once the news is reported, it's too late, right? I mean, you buy rumors and sell news. So the smart money is selling into you if CNBC is reporting some news. And it's the average person that's buying on the news. It's why they always lose. Yeah,
that's the signal for them to get out when it hits the news wire.
Yeah, and I'm fully, and I can't 100% prove this, but doing this almost 20 years, when I throw out dates in advance and then banks do specific things in that, in my cycles, I don't think it's coincidence. I've seen it thousands of times. It's amazing.
Well,
And they're not always right, too. I don't want to sit here and say that I'm always right, but it's more than 50% of the time. And then I use I kind of layer everything with technicals and, trying to use some of my logical thoughts.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because the Mayans down in Mexico, they had some of the most accurate calendars ever.
Mm-hmm.
And all they did was they used astrology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what's really interesting too, where I learned a lot of my stuff, it's from old textbooks. Like you've heard me say that. One of them specifically is over 100 years old. And what's interesting is one of the reproductions that they made, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years later, they've removed some of the stuff. The book that I have, I've seen it on eBay one other time, and it was going for $800, and that was like 7, 8 years ago.
You're kidding me.
No. He's just a super old trader.
Well,
and a lot of it's psychology.
Well, Dan and I have talked about this, and Greg, you've talked with us about this as well. There's absolutely zero doubt in my mind that there are groups that have existed for hundreds, maybe thousands of years that run the world.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm blanking on the name of them right now. The Knights Templar. They had a cycle actually that lined up in 2008. The origination of the Knights Templar lined up with a peak in the 08 collapse, believe it or not. So I don't know if I've ever told you that, but that's what was kind of one of my intros to the cycle was that.
Yeah, well, my point is that if those groups existed 1,000 years ago, they didn't have computers back then.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so,
totally.
Right. So
yeah,
they know the oldest secrets around, and now they just use technology to make it even that much better for them.
And easier and faster, etc.
Yeah. And there's no doubt in my mind that this stuff exists where stiffs like us, we're so busy on the treadmill, most of us don't even have time to notice anything.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. And the reason I got into cycles was it's more about psychology. It's not like, oh, hey, cycles just happen because they're cycles. But human emotion really is, in my opinion, hasn't evolved since man first stepped on Earth, right? Like, to kind of take a crude example, if I was to punch both you guys in the face right now, there's probably only going to be a couple responses, right? And I can bet based on your personalities what's going to happen. You're either going to fight me back, you're either going to just stand there, or you're going to take off running away, right? And I don't really see any other scenarios than that. And human beings do an absolutely terrible job of studying history. So one of the reasons I study the 100-year cycle is because the average American passes away around the age of about 78, and that knowledge is lost. And when things happen, whatever it is, we've lost that knowledge. So things very, very often repeat on 100-year cycles. Even looking at like COVID, like David, like you saw my stuff. Late, was it the 1900s with Weimar Germany? They had the Spanish flu and everything, and then it led into hyperinflation around the globe with Weimar Germany and stuff. And it's very possible we are on that trajectory.
That's where I think we're going.
Yeah, I think we're going to be in the 70s. I think we're going to have stagflation basically on steroids. And my hope is that we are not on the 100-year cycle. So there might be some bias there. But again, actually part of this cycle, it's actually two things. It's astrology, and then there's a 50-year cycle. It's a 70s thing coming in on Monday too. So 1973, you go look at a chart back then, and it dipped fairly decently.
Yeah, the 70s were, I don't really remember them that well, but the early 70s. But
I mean, 70s is fascinating to me because in the 70s we had inflation, low growth, hate the Russians, Roe versus Wade first appeared. And you remember, what was it, like a year or two ago? They just had the Roe versus Wade thing like out of the blue. And everyone was like, why are we talking about this? Well, to me, in my head, I was like, it's totally normal because it's a 50-year cycle. I'm even seeing bell bottoms on like 20 somethings around town. That's even our clothing is recycling. Those big sunglasses, like that started in the late 70s, early 80s. You seeing those around town? Everyone's wearing these massive sunglasses.
Unreal,
Clothing
dude.
cycles. It's amazing.
Yeah. People with long hair, facial hair now.
Yeah. Just right the 70s. Yeah, totally. Right?
Yeah, it's something. But also, what you said about being in the past as well. So if you talk about Builder, I mean, they just came out with earnings, and the earnings were positive, not as good as previous quarter. They're stepping down, but people have to remember that earnings, it's a rear view mirror shot. It's not forward thinking. It's not a reflection of what's going to happen next quarter.
Well, I mean, Wall Street's just a giant game anyway. So, I mean, a lot of beats, etc., are coming from expectations from some analysts. So all the company, I mean, that's why when some company will report horrid earnings, they're like, hey, we lost half of our money, and then the stock goes up 20%. You're like, how did that happen? Oh, they beat expectations because the experts thought they were going to lose 55%, but they only lost 50% of their money. So everyone piles into their stock. I mean, it's like it's totally
First Solar. That's First Solar.
Yeah, it's a giant video game. That's all it is to me.
Yeah, speaking of First Solar,
good video game.
Did you see that activity on Friday where it went up $50?
No, I didn't. Why? What was the news?
They bought
straight up in the air.
They bought a research company in Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, how's that make any sense? What? Yeah. So it went straight up.
Yeah. Inga Swedish meatballs.
I mean, typically what happens when a company acquires another company, that usually goes down because they've in the short run have added a bunch of costs. And you don't know exactly if it's going to pan out or not. So people kind of panic and they typically sell. Very rarely do you see it go straight up like that. But
the all-time high is 2008 for First Solar, and it was 290, I think, or 280. But there's some resistance around 230 to 240, and it actually went up after hours to 234. And it started out the day, I think, at 175.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, well, to Dan's point earlier too, very, very often right before you see major turns, whether it's up or down, you see a lot of vibration with a lot of things. We're even watching like the 10-year paper, the bond, jumping around 0.1 basis point all the time, or at least for the last few weeks. So you'll see kind of agitation in stock prices right before something starts to have a massive move. So I'm not shocked that First Solar did that.
Yeah, well, that's what happened in 2020 as well.
Yeah,
things were screaming higher, and then it hit a trend line, and down it went. Yeah, the dollar, the DXY is it jumped about 80 cents on Friday.
Yeah, actually, I just covered that in my market update. So it's still below my 105, like Armageddon line, but basically has a triple bottom is why I think it popped on Friday. Also,
because if it broke 101, it was going down to like 90.
Yeah, but here's the other thing with my cycle coming this week, people instinctively, when panic hits, buy the dollar. I've been doing that for forever. So to see that go up Friday was another tell for me. We're probably going to get some news this week.
Yeah, it certainly didn't help silver on Friday, that's for sure.
I missed too. I'm sorry. I looked at the dates. The 16th, Tuesday, is the start of my cycle.
Okay.
Tuesday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the other thing is Fortuna. I was telling Dan, I thought Fortuna was very interesting because last week they reported they bought another mine in Africa. And they bought a mine in Africa 2 years ago in 2021. And a day or two after they reported it, their stock dropped like 15 or 20%. And then silver
which is
dropped.
normal again when you acquire a company because you're removing your cash, right? Or you're taking on debt to do it.
Yeah, and it's an uncertainty. And it's even though the company they bought was supposedly a cash cow, who knows? But anyway, so what happened was they then silver dropped, and I think their stock price dropped from like 750 down to like 250 over the next year. And so what happened was And I said this to Dan. I said, so after they bought that mine, this is the other thing that Dan looks at that I think is very good. He identified that Fortuna only has, what, Dan, 35% institutional investors in Fortuna?
36%, yeah.
Okay. Whereas
38, sorry.
Somebody like a Wingstop will have 100%, right?
Yeah.
Because that's who's driving it up. So the Fortuna, because it was mostly Joe and Jane owning it, I think a lot of them are thinking, whoa, last time they bought a mine, the thing dropped. So Fortuna dropped like 10%, I think, the day after. And I told Dan, I said, this is an opportunity to buy them because Fortuna's numbers, they already see. The thing with the miners is they come out and they report what their numbers are, or their production is before their numbers. So you pretty much know how their sales are going to be.
Yeah.
And they came out saying they had record numbers in gold and silver from last quarter. And so the only thing you don't know is their cost. So I think Fortuna was an opportunity, but then obviously everything got hit last Friday as well.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I'm biased. Call my little company or Silver Liberties. I think miners, and again, I'm not anyone's financial advisor. I'm just talking about what I do. I think they're one of the most undervalued things in the stock market. I mean, they constantly get beat down all the time. It's absolutely amazing that companies that mine real money are getting this beat down. And one of the reasons that that's happening is because their costs are rising. But why are their costs rising? It's because of inflation that we pretend isn't happening. Like, what they reported last week, they said inflation dipped below 5%. Like, I seriously doubt it. Nothing in my world is going or is dropping or is only going up 5%.
Well, do you know one of the leading causes of cost increases for First Majestic?
What?
It was currency exchange, because the price of the peso in Mexico went up 10% against the dollar.
Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And so that's an unforeseen, and the dollar is continuing to weaken against the peso.
It's the globe moved away from it. I mean, I think the game is up. I mean, if you follow someone like Mike Maloney, he's done tons of research on the average length of a fiat currency. Now, just the average fiat currency is different than a reserve currency, but the average fiat currency lasts somewhere between 40 and 45 years. We went full fiat in 1971. So I'm not surprised we're seeing all of the issues that we're seeing. And my big question too is, I think you're about to see a battle kind of between the Fed and Yellen. I mean, we have stated debt, right? It's 33 trillion at roughly 5% now. And I do that math in your head, what we're paying out as far as just interest payments.
Yeah, 1.5 trillion.
What's that?
1.5 trillion, 1.6 trillion.
Yeah, we start going up much more than that. We're talking about like funding the entire United States Army in interest payments, right? I mean, I don't think that they can keep their foot to the floor raising interest rates with the amount of debt load that we have. And if you, not to like bore everybody to tears, but if you delve deeper into the balance sheets of our government, I mean, they have an entire section on their books that are called what do you call them? It's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Unfunded
liabilities.
Right. So instead of 32 trillion, you're up over 200 trillion or something.
It's in the hundreds of trillions.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like, I mean, nobody, like, I don't have my own personal, books, and then I've got this whole side column where my wife's like, why do we have $300,000 in unfunded liabilities? Not, oh, don't worry about it. That's just stuff I'll pay later at some point. Like, my wife would have a fit, right? Like, what are you talking about? Oh, this is just an accounting thing. Don't worry about it, honey. But when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, we're completely insolvent on paper. I think the globe knows it. That's why they're moving away from the reserve currency.
Well,
unbelievable, dude.
I know you've got to
This
go,
is all
but
public stuff, though, right? Like, I don't think my thoughts are that negative. I think it's fairly logical, and more people are seeing it. I think.
well, I know you keep saying that, but I think
I know
people
that I know that they are, because if you go and look at bullion dealers, what happened during the banking crisis there? Record demand. Instantly, all the big bullion dealers were like, look, we're having massive overload, delivery delays. I bought some gold middle of last month. Still hasn't shipped. You know, I'm assuming I'm going to get it. They're usually pretty good about it. Had minimum order amounts because they don't want to take people buying just 1 or 2 ounces of silver because they can't fulfill all of the orders. The average person is waking up.
I think there's truth to that. I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And
especially
well, and you're
especially-
starting to see,
yeah,
like Dan was saying,
Sorry to
Dan and I
interrupt.
spoke
Sorry.
earlier, you're starting to see a lot of the states fight back as well,
Sure.
Yes.
right? Dan,
Yeah.
you were right? You were saying DeSantis and the guy from Texas are
Yeah, so
trying.
Texas, exactly. So real quick, so Texas, from what I understand, Greg, is rolling out their own form of a CBDC in like September.
I know. I've heard some different stuff on that. I've also heard these are crazy rumors.
Backed by gold.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Well,
I've
heard it
also
for 3
heard.
years. Yeah,
What's that?
I've heard it for 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
but-
been hearing. Yeah, I've been hearing stuff like that too. I even just this total rumor stuff, right? And I don't really put much emphasis on it. I even heard Texas reach out to the BRICS. they as a state want to reach out to the BRICS and be like, we'll transact with you guys outside of the dollar if need be.
So DeSantis, the governor of Florida, 2 days ago, held a press conference, and I should send you guys the video. He's not following along with the federal government that's rolling out the CBDC in July.
Yeah,
He's not going to allow it here.
No, and I mean, what I find really interesting with when I talk to people, it's almost like people have forgotten that the states are created or exist to push back against the federal government. They don't have to just roll over and accept whatever the federal government is doing and saying. I watched part of that, Dan, and I thought DeSantis made a good point. He was like, he goes, it's just about central control. People don't want it. And what's most interesting, too, throughout human history, if you go back thousands of years, when a country, when their currency is failing, almost 100% of the time, they will roll out a competing fiat currency, which instantly fails. And that's what CBDC is. That's all it is. The dollar is already digital, and they're just rolling out something else. It has more control over us, but it's the exact same thing. It has no intrinsic value. And I believe it will fail.
Well, it's like what Jim Willie talked about with the Scheist dollar.
I'm not familiar with that. What did he say?
Basically, what was going to happen is the rest of the world was going to eventually say, we're not taking the dollar. They'd reorganize it into the new dollar, which he calls the Scheist dollar, which, like you said, would fail within 6 to 10 to 12 months.
Yes. And I mean, one of the best examples, if anyone is interested in cycles at all, is to go back to France. Google France John Law. I think we're almost in lockstep with that. Their little cycle, all of it happened within 4 years. They devalued their currency. They had a housing bubble, which we had in 2008. Then the currency went to zero. And then there was a run on the banks because back then you could turn in your francs to get gold. Banks all went bust because people started taking the gold. Then they started to pass laws that saying if you are hoarding gold, we're going to guillotine you. And people started to flee the country. And during that time period, I think it was called the livre, if I remember. They had the francs, and then they brought out their competing currency, the livre, and it failed within like 6 months to a year. And all they did was come out and just print tons of it, and it went to zero. And I think what they're going to do with CBDCs to get people on it is when the dollar starts to go down, they're going to be like, all you got to do is open a bank account. We'll give you 10 times the amount of CBDC than you had in dollars. So like, let's say you got 100 grand sitting in your bank account. You're like, holy cow, I'm going to get $1 million in CBDCs. But if everybody does that, the price of everything's instantly overnight going to go up 10%. You're not any more wealthy. You've just moved your wealth into something else that has no value, and it's going to go down. It's crazy.
We just talked about that, and they're going to call it universal, but it won't be universal. It'll just be the people who play the game.
Yeah. And
Well,
I'm at the point where I'm not anyone's financial advisor. You know, you got to do your own stuff. My wife basically stays in the system, and all my income has moved us outside of the system. So I'm kind of doing what Dan's saying. I'm riding the fence there a little bit because if stuff gets really weird, I'm going to be incredibly happy that I've had this mindset and I've been acting for the last 10 plus years. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to lose a little bit of money. But all my wife's stuff will go straight up. So I don't really care. But I think where most people are going to get really damaged, or people that think that I'm too negative, or they think it's silly to own gold and silver. If I'm wrong, I'm going to lose money. If they're wrong, they'll get wiped out. That's the difference.
They'll be obliterated.
I think
Big difference.
I think some really terrible things are coming, and the problem is like my buddy Tilo, my German friend down here. He lives way down on the bottom part of Mexico, where it's like as poor as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to me, he goes, you know, these people wouldn't even notice if New York City disappeared. You know, if everything fell apart, it would never affect their day because they're already as low as it can go. But somebody living in Colorado or Florida or New York City, all of a sudden, your standard of living is completely changed. And
that's the key word, I think, and maybe we can end it here. Every time we say we're going 20 minutes, we go like an hour.
I agree with that.
I got to make Mother's Day dinner, and I love talking to you guys. I think you just nailed it, Dan. It's the standard of living that people don't really realize. So you go talk to like my parents, they'll tell you like,
Agreed.
oh, I mean, look at like a 50s family, right? And I'm generalizing, but I've studied the 50s a lot because I'm really interested to see the difference from then and today.
Absolutely.
Back then, typically, you had a one car, one working, like usually the male in the house, the dad was working.
That's right.
People were more.
People back in the 50s.
Mom was at home.
Yeah,
and it worked. And
you didn't have to go to college, and you could have a high school degree and whatever job that got you, like a plumber, electrician.
30-year job, 30, 40 years with a pension.
Yeah, you could support a full family, go on vacation, and then you start to look at the amount of time worked in the 50s versus today. People today work more hours and they take less vacation. You have to have two people working,
100%.
Right? Which is a standard of living drop. And then think of our kids. My generation, I'm 43, the term latchkey kids, because that's when two parents had to start going to work. The standard of living for kids started to drop because you don't have your mom or dad at home helping you do stuff. You got to take your key off your neck because you're a latchkey kid. Let yourself in the house and, you know, it's just different. It's just different. And I'm at a point today, too, I think with my wife and I, we're like kind of upper middle class. But we're both forced to work. If one of us, something happens or my hours got cut back drastically, I'd be falling down the rung in the middle class. I have savings and stuff, but it would get evaporated fairly quickly. Basically, you have to have two people working to own a house in Colorado today.
Mm-hmm.
That's a standard of living drop massively.
Most states, I would say.
Yeah.
If not all.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, maybe there's a handful of states on one hand, 6 left, you know, like maybe Oklahoma, parts of Nebraska, maybe New Mexico. I'm just speculating. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think.
Well, your parents came from Canada, Greg, right?
Right. Yep.
Why did they come to the U.S.?
My dad. It was just more opportunity in the United States.
Exactly.
Yep.
So he didn't love Canada?
I don't think it wasn't that he loved it. I think he just felt there was more opportunity here for him and the family.
I understand.
Exactly.
I'm just asking this because I say the same thing to people in the United States today. All of us have somebody in our families who left their birth country to come to the United States for better opportunity,
Mhm.
better
Yeah.
freedoms,
Yep.
better something. That it's a big decision, a big move. You don't do that lightly.
No.
Well, yeah, and you know, my wife came from Brazil for obvious reasons. So
I didn't know that.
Dave says all the time.
She saw Dan's picture on Match.com and she had to come.
Oh yeah, it was my brewing, you know, devastatingly good looks. I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a good-looking guy, Dan. I'm sure.
Thanks,
fun.
dude. Thanks, I
Donnie's,
appreciate it.
Donnie's.
I gave her the gunshot, Greg, and she couldn't resist.
Yeah,
But
there
anyway,
you
Greg
go.
felt to throw up. He's like, "Really, dude, please stop."
Yeah.
But no, what was I going to say? But Dave says now, and it's interesting. So our relatives, I'm only second generation, so I can relate to this. All my relatives, growing up when I was a child, my grandparents, my cousins, all that were from Italy and Greece, and so I'm not that far removed. And there could come a time with the U.S. People can't envision this, but like our ancestors from Europe came here, there might be a mass migration from here someday to maybe the Far East because of the BRICS, maybe Latin America.
It's happening already.
knows?
All these remote workers.
It is to an extent, but it's small scale right now.
We've got 2 million. We've got 2 million retirees in Mexico.
Yep.
No, yeah, I mean, I think
you're right.
Both,
It's
I think
growing. The
you're both
expat
right.
community, it's growing, right?
I think you're both right. I've read the amount of Americans renouncing their citizenship, and you have to understand too in America,
renouncing. Wow.
when you renounce,
what's that mean?
we're setting records, and we've been setting records since 2012, 2013.
You're kidding me.
No, but the thing is, to your point, Dan, it's still smaller numbers. It's like it'll be like 10,000, maybe 15,000.
Well, that's because they increased the fees so great to renounce now.
Yeah, they've made it harder. But here's the thing with when you renounce,
let them say it. Yeah, what's it mean, man? What's it mean?
You can't get it back. That's a massive decision. So these people,
it's permanent.
It's permanent. You can't come back, right? So, like Canada,
you got to get a visa to come back to the U.S.
Yeah, Canada. I like, so when I became an American, they still view me as Canadian. Go back to Canada at any time. U.S. only views me as an American. They told me basically to stop thinking of myself as a Canadian. But if you renounce that American citizenship, that's a massive, massive life decision. You cannot undo that.
So can I ask a dumb question? These people that are renouncing, here's my dumb question. They obviously have another life preserver set up, right? They're already a citizen or
I can give you the answer.
Permanent resident, I would think, somewhere else.
I would think so.
I would think.
Yeah, it's like the guy from Google who renounced. Most of the people who renounce do it because of tax reasons.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's why.
Like they'll move to Puerto Rico or something.
Most,
a lot of finance guys are Puerto Rico.
Most people will do what I do, right? Like I have multiple citizenships, and that allows me to basically leave and live someplace else.
Exactly.
And then, but I still have to file with the U.S. government. But if you tell me, I mean, are you willing to renounce your U.S. citizens? Absolutely not. Not at this time. No.
Yeah. So there's only 2 countries in the world that I believe that even if you live outside the U.S. and the other one I think is a small country in Africa, I can't recall, but there's only 2 countries I'm aware of that if you live outside the country, U.S. being the premier one, that and you're even if you're not working in the U.S. earning income in the U.S., you still have to file your income taxes and pay your share to the crown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, very interesting. We've talked about this multiple times. I read that there are several countries that are looking to change their tax laws to mimic the United States now.
I totally believe that.
And I think one of them's Canada.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, because I have a buddy who's Canadian, and he started a YouTube channel, and he makes over $1 million a year doing his YouTube channel. And he lives outside of Canada. He lived in China, now he's in Malaysia, so he doesn't have to pay any of that money to Canada, as it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, for him. I kind of want to end on this note, if that's okay.
Yeah. Go ahead,
please, dude. Go ahead.
Sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I think people think I'm incredibly negative. It's not how my brain works. From birth, is just part of my DNA. I can spot things that are not okay. or broken on some level. It doesn't necessarily mean I have the mental wherewithal to figure out how to fix it, but it's very easy for me to see things that are broken. All I believe that is going to happen, I think we're going to cycle. I think we're on like I said, a 50-year cycle. I think it's going to be like the 70s, but worse. But what happened to America during the 70s? Some turmoil, emotions, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, depressions or deep recessions. When they happen, it doesn't mean that you have to be in a state of depression as well, right? Anytime you have chaos, there's massive opportunity. I think as long as you keep your wits about you, you've got a good level of physical health and support, like people like this or just around you that you can bounce ideas off of, I think is going to be super beneficial. I do think in the short run, it's important to have a little bit of food at your house. And, again, I run a company that has the word silver in it. I think having some form of inflation hedges at this point in time, doesn't have to be gold and silver, are exceptionally, exceptionally important right now. And they are getting harder to find, and or the price of them have gone to the moon, except for silver. But I sleep well at night. And while I think things might get weird for the next few years, I'm still hopeful for the future. And I actually believe that I'm going to come out the other side of this way, way, way more well off than I am currently.
Well, you have to think optimistically, otherwise you won't be able to get out of bed, dude. So,
Right. And I think people, that is going to happen to some people. And again, I don't want to leave it on a terrible note, but you go back to like 1920s, bankers were jumping out of buildings, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's not going to be me because I'm ahead of this and I'm keeping my mind open to what's going on. I can see, I'm hoping nothing happens. We just keep going along this path, but I can see a deflationary or an inflationary event happening possibly as early as this week.
Yeah. It's coming. I like you said, the energy, I can feel it. It sounds corny, but
No,
I've done a lot of work with trying to get into vibrations, because there's a lot of wisdom in vibrations that I still don't understand. But there's a lot, even things that you can see that most people can't see from the vibrations. But we'll go down that rabbit hole another day. But I just want to finish by saying, hey, 1976, my favorite song ever, More Than a Feeling by Boston. So the 70s produced that. And also
the 70s produced a lot of great music. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of great music. And I forget what else I was going to say.
Dave, to your point, it's kind of interesting you're saying that. So I'm actually reading a book right now. I was just pulling it up as you're speaking, called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You ever heard of that? I don't know if you can.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that'll. It's not going to come up.
I can give you.
I think you'd enjoy that. It's kind of. It's in the field of energy and basically using your mind to kind of tap into that to change your environment. Whether you think that's crazy or not, that's up to you.
Yeah, no, I have one book over here that on this topic. I just haven't read it in a while.
Yeah, I'm on board with energy. I feel it as well. And it is interesting for me with my mind. I'm more and more every day thinking about the opposite side and coming out of what I think is coming. I'm no longer focused on, is this coming? Because I think it's already happening. We're witnessing it. We're living it right now. And I'm focused on coming out of this intact and better off than I am currently.
Yeah. And Greg, I don't know how you feel about this topic, but I'm going to mention it as well. For the one thing that I would strongly encourage people to do is read the Bible. Mm-hmm. Get a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I know I sound like one of those sports guys, but it's true. I mean, the Bible has been around for a couple thousand years. It has endured the test of time. There's a reason why that it's endured because it has nuggets of information. And people will read the Bible and be like, wow, I never knew that came from the Bible, because colloquialisms and just everything that we take for granted today, we think it came from J.P. Morgan when it really came from the Bible. We think it came from Lincoln.
Right as you're saying that, a lot of my cycle work has come from religious texts. not just the Bible.
But it's everybody has to. That's all I'll say on that. Is form a relation because it gives you a strength and a peace that, for example, one of my favorite prayers is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he will make your path straight.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of peace because the bottom line is once you realize you're on the river and you're flowing down and there's really not a lot you can do sometimes.
It being in sync with the universe and energy and stuff, in a way, instead of fighting it all the time, right?
Actually, yeah, Dan, there's another book called Power versus Force, and the whole book is written exactly what you just said. Great book.
That's how I try to live. It's not easy. I haven't mastered it. I'll be the first to admit, but I did even look at that book. Like Dave's saying, you want to be the leaf on the water. Otherwise, you could be an Olympic swimmer, but if you're going to swim against the ocean or the Mississippi River, good luck. You're probably going to tire out quick, right?
Yeah, totally.
I
used to live on the Mississippi. It will tire you out.
There you go. So you know firsthand, man.
Yeah.
And for those who just want a starting spot, go to Matthew 6. Chapter 6.
Yeah,
read that chapter. The chapters are very short.
The Lord's Prayer, yeah.
Okay. Not only that, it talks about the birds in the air, and also Proverbs book 3, especially verses 5 through 6, which is what I just referenced. Yeah. Start with Matthew 6, and if that doesn't get your interest, well, then
no, and I'm agreeing with you. I think it's kind of like what I was saying. I think you need to be. Building community, I think, around you is one of the most important things. Spirituality is right up there, and then having your physical body in shape. I don't think you want to be, for various reasons. For those of you that don't know too, we talk about finance every time I come on with you guys. That's only half my life. My other half of my life is I've been a corrective exercise specialist, and I'm an LMT. I'm a licensed massage therapist.
Oh, cool.
I help people on their physical sense all the time, and I think
so you see how it's all connected.
The marriage of those three is incredibly important for being fulfilled and I think happy, because at the end of the day, maybe you have a bunch of money and you come out of this all fine and dandy, but if you don't have community and spirituality or your health, well, who cares? Doesn't matter.
It's all tied together, man. In my opinion, it's all tied together.
Is that the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, it is right now. Just go on to Patreon and search for Silver Liberties. We've got 2 tiers.
I'll include the link.
Yeah, cool. It's as cheap as $5. I've got literally hundreds of dollars worth of seminars in there, which you can get for $20 if you want it. I don't know. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do it, to be honest. I just because of my mindset, and it doesn't mean that I'll stop talking about finance and stuff, but I may pivot because once this stuff starts to go, it'll be too late. I don't think you'll even be able to buy gold and silver in the not too distant future. So me coming on here and talking about it will serve almost no purpose except to upset people.
I know that, Greg, you've tried to help people. I mean, you are truly a special guy that way, in that I know you take a lot of pleasure in educating and helping people. And
I do, man. I appreciate it.
I know you do. That's why you're a special person, because our world needs more people like you. And that's why I support your channel, because there aren't a lot of people like you out there. So that's why I want to make sure that you succeed.
I'm literally, I filter the world physically. I'm having a tingling sensation, man. That resonated with me super hard. I know it sounds probably funny, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying that. Part of my identity is I'm a teacher at heart. And I feel like I give away a lot of my stuff, and I don't care, because we're at a point now where if I can help anybody and help them come out the other side of what I think is coming, I sleep better at night. Yep.
Yeah, no, you're a good man, Greg. No doubt about it. On that note, we don't want to get him in trouble. He needs to he's got to take care of the queen. Go cook some dinner. Cook some dinner, man.
Don't worry,
Let him
Greg.
go.
I ordered the Chick-fil-A for you.
There you go. There you go.
I love talking to you guys. Love talking to you guys as always. Let's do it again.
Worries, man.
Happy Mother's Day. to everybody out
Happy
there.
Mother's Day, man.
Give
Give your kids a hug for us, man. Take care. Take
Will
care,
do.
buddy.
See you guys.
All
Thanks,
right, man.
Greg. Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome.
Have a good night, Pat.
Greg, you're always screwing around, man. Always.
I know. I'm having like here you can hear it. I'm having like the worst bout of hay fever in probably like 35 years. So my voice is kind of.
I had it a week or two ago, man. I'm never allergic to and my eyes and nose. I felt like I had the flu for like 3 days, and my eyes were watering, and I had the sniffles, and my practically snot's running out of my nose. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what it's exceptionally bad right now.
Like a 5-year-old, I'm blowing my nose every